It took me, when it was verified from this relative, I think I needed to I think I went into shock for one. And I think I just needed to process what exactly I needed to do. And one of the things I needed to do was call my sister, because that was probably one of the hardest calls I've ever made. And
what'd you have to tell her?
And I also, I had to tell her that, we're not related. 39 years of thinking that we're half siblings. We're not.
This is What Next, the Adoptee Rights Podcast. I'm Gregory Luce, the Executive Director of Adoptees United and an adoptee rights lawyer. In each episode, I'll talk about the state of adoptee rights around the world. We feature legislative updates, interviews, legal developments, and the frequent absurdities and complications of being an adopted person in the United States or wherever you are. This week I do something a bit unusual. I interview one of my clients. And her story is crazy, frustrating, and ridiculously complicated. It also highlights what adopted people must navigate when available maps and directions are locked down in secret. That is, any record related to their births and to their adoptions. This week I talk with Diane Bazella, a Minnesota-born adopted person who, much later in life, discovered that the truth she had thought was correct for decades was not the actual truth.
So thanks a lot for having me on, Greg. I appreciate it. And so I was born at Booth Memorial Salvation Army in St. Paul in 1960. And it's a home, or it was a hospital for unwed mothers.
Yeah, I think it's really well known in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Everyone who's been adopted in this region knows about Booth Memorial.
Right, especially in 1960.
Right.
And I was placed in a infant foster care home, private home, and I was there for 9 months. And I then went to a family in a surrounding area that was not far from her, and was adopted.
And how old were you when you were adopted?
9 months old.
Okay, so you were in foster care for 9 months, then adopted, sort of a traditional adoption, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, and what was that in Hennepin County, Minnesota? I think.
Yes, it was Hennepin County.
Yeah. Have you always lived in Minnesota?
Yeah, I've always lived in Minnesota.
Oh, interesting.
I'm in Minnetonka, actually.
All right, and then so I assume, and maybe I shouldn't always assume this with adopted people, but you knew that you were adopted at some point in your life.
Yes, at about 5 years old, I remember my mom sitting me down and telling me I was adopted. And I was very curious. And I think when I was about 9, I just felt like I had this knowing that I would find her at some point in my life.
Find her?
And
your birth mother?
Yeah, I would find my birth mother. Yeah, I always felt that I would find her. And it was just a matter of time.
And you were born in 1960.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's sort of that whole, some people call it the baby scoop era, where a lot of mothers were in maternity homes, especially white moms were in maternity homes and often felt coerced into relinquished children. So that's that whole era. I'm part of that era too. I just was born and adopted in a different city.
Right.
But so you're curious, obviously, at age 9. And did that curiosity build over time and finally?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember being at certain places growing up and thinking, you'd see somebody and you'd think, oh, I kind of look like her. And, I wonder if that's my birth mom. And yeah, I was thinking about it a lot, through the years. And then they changed the law. I think it was in 77 or 78, I think.
Yeah, they changed it in 77.
Yeah, and then my adopted mother I think she was just as curious, so we ended up going down to Hennepin County and talking to a social worker. And that social worker found some unidentifying information and sent it to me, actually. And my mother and I sat down and read it, and it was like a really big deal. And it just described my parents or my birth parents, and it described like when I was in foster care, like my development and things about relatives and just descriptive things, like how old they were, what they looked like, or And that was a really big deal. But, I also was battling at that time, even then, I was battling addiction.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, at 15, I went into treatment, and then I went into treatment again at 20.
I don't think I knew that about you. Or maybe you told me, but I don't recall.
Yeah. I've, excuse me, I've been kind of in and out, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But at 20, and so, I had to be 21 to search, right? So I had gone into treatment at 20, and I really wanted to make sure that I was together with myself and clear. And so about 22 is when I finally got a hold of a social worker at Hennepin County.
Mm-hmm.
And the search took about 10 months.
So the search was to find, under Minnesota law at that time, and it still is the same way, is that you can apply for your records or identifying information, but they're not going to release them until they find a birth parent, and that birth parent agrees to release the information.
Right.
I'm assuming that's the law that you were dealing with at that time too.
Right. I think it took 10 months, and they located her mother. And
located what was
my birth mother's mother.
Okay.
And then she called her daughter, and then my birth mother called me, and it just kind of took off from there.
Do you remember what year this was?
Yep, 1983.
Okay.
So I just turned 20. I think I was just turning 23.
Right.
So yeah, and then I flew down like two weeks later, and I was meeting half siblings. I was meeting her. I was, a part of I was a part of their lives, and it,
right.
I lived very far away from them, but we kept in touch, and I'd go down maybe once every year and visit. And
what part of the country were they in?
North Carolina.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you said you had a relationship with a half sister.
Yep. And have two half brothers and a half sister.
Wow. And of course, your birth mom.
Yes. And her husband. And then, you have to sit and really think back. So it's, and then she helped me find my birth father. She gave me his name, and he only lived like a half an hour from me.
Right.
So then I started a relationship with him, and we lost touch in 1990 around. And, So
during this time, so from 1983, and let's take it all the way up to more recently, let's say a year ago, in 2021, you have a relationship with your birth mother, with siblings, and that's a fairly continuous relationship. Each year you're talking to them every so often, and
my birth parents are both deceased.
Right.
So, and I lost a brother. And so there's only two half siblings left,
right,
which is my sister and my younger brother. They're both younger.
When did your birth mother die?
In 2000.
Oh, okay. So it was about more than 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I got to know her for 17 years, and, it was a good relationship. She was doing her life there, and I was doing my life here, and
right.
And my sister and all my siblings were doing their life, and then I kind of lost contact with my sister even for a little bit, and but of course I had to call her after I found out new information. So
right, and so
we're back talking. Yeah, we're back talking, and she's in my life, and my younger brother's in my life, and yeah, so we're kind of back on again. So,
and you just referred to the new information. And, I feel fortunate that you contacted me within a week or two of you finding out that new information. And that was in May of 2021. What happened in May of 2021 that changed everything?
Well, I think I kind of have to go back a little bit. Yeah, I have to kind of go back a little bit, because it's like, so when I moved to where I live now, I had always thought about doing DNA. Mm-hmm. So Ancestry was huge then in 2017. And I thought, I was kind of wondered in the back of my mind if I had another half sibling. I also wanted to know my nationality because I wanted to pass it on to my adult children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a DNA, and I think it was December of 2017, I got my results back, and I matched with 2 people, and I didn't know who they were. I mean, as it usually goes, right? You don't,
Right,
I'm like, I don't know who these people are. I emailed them immediately on Ancestor
Mm-hmm.
and asked them, questions like, do you know these people? Do you know these people? No. And
And when you say these people, you're talking about people that you've had a
yeah,
relationship
people like my birth parents stuff, and they were just coming back with no. And I'd say, like, are you adopted, or was one of your parents adopted? I mean, I was figuring out everything, and I just hit a wall, really. And the one thing I did take away from talking to both of them, email, was they both had the same last maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to them, I just want you to know you guys match. And if you ever do genealogy, or you want to figure it out, you both have the same last name. Anyway, I let it go then. I just let it go.
So it just sort of just sat
yeah,
there.
I couldn't figure it out.
I find that
I didn't have their help.
Yeah, and that's really common, I think, with a lot of adoptees. They find out some information, it kind of goes somewhere, but kind of doesn't, and then there's this space of time, sometimes years, before you come back to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it did years. It was years. It was like in April of 2020, I matched with another person, and fortunately, she was into genealogy and doing family tree stuff. And she said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna figure out how we're related," because it was a strong relationship. It wasn't just like a third, fourth cousin. It was like a first, second cousin.
This person that's this genealogist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it took us about 13 months. And, she would question me, and she would say, "Diane, are you sure that's your birth father?" She's figuring it out. Somebody's on her side of the family. Right. So, and she kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And I'm like, I mean, I think so. I'm like,
let me ask you one quick question before you get there. By this time, do you have your original birth certificate?
Yes, I had gotten my original birth certificate released when I met my birth mother, and she called, or she wrote in or something, and okayed it to be released to me.
So you've had that.
So I've had it for 24, or since I was 24, probably.
Oh, okay. And then, do you mind telling your name on that, your first name on that birth certificate?
My first name on that birth certificate is Kelly.
Right. All right. So sorry, go back. Now we can go back to probably a cousin that you're talking to with the.
Yeah. So yeah. And I'm, and it was difficult because back when I did an ancestry, the person I matched with the most, if I would have known how to click on something, if I would have been more familiar with it, right, I could have seen that we're like 100% whatever, half sibling actually. But I didn't know that. So, I mean, it just kind of started unfolding, and as this cousin, or this person that I matched with, who was so determined to figure this out, we figured it out. And after matching with even more people on her side of the family. So it turns out that my birth father is not my birth father, and my birth mother is not my birth mother. And we verified it a week later as this new relative talked to her relative and verified that, I have different birth parents.
So this person, Kelly's, that's your name in your original birth record, that's actually not you.
Right.
That's in some other, presumably adoptee out there, whose mother you had a relationship with for decades, or at least 17 years.
Right. And I think that it took me, when it was verified from this relative, I think I needed to I went into shock, for one. And I think I just needed to process what exactly I needed to do. And one of the things I needed to do was call my sister, because that was probably one of the hardest calls I've ever made. And
what did you have to tell her?
And I also, I had to tell her that, we're not related. 39 years of thinking that we're half siblings, we're not. And she was shocked. And I mean, it was, getting up the guts to call her even and tell her. And then I had to figure out, I knew that I legally had to do something. And after I told her, she reached out to a woman who wrote about Booth Memorial Hospital.
Right. And I know that book. We'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yep. And the author wrote her back and gave a bunch of information that we could use to reach out to anybody. And you were one of them. Thank God.
Yeah.
So
I remember that call.
Yep.
I remember that email, of course. And then, I get a lot of emails, but this was one was like, oh, I need to follow up on this one right away.
Thank God too, because I have to say that knowing that you're adopted as well, I immediately knew I'm with the right person. He's adopted as well. And you immediately feel this bond with anybody who's adopted.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, like our story.
I'm never going to say to you, well, what's the big deal? Because this is a huge deal.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I could imagine some people who aren't adopted thinking, well, it's just paperwork, when it's not just paperwork.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole mind thing to wrap around this old reality to this new reality. And, there's a lot involved, and even in talking to adopted people, our stories are different, just like in the 12-step program that I'm in. Right. Our stories are all different, but we have what we go through, we have the same emotions. Right. So immediately you bond. And I felt that with you. And I just felt like, you've really helped me through this too, with, just being patient and kind of grounded through this whole thing, because I mean, I have a lot of tools and a lot of, I know how to kind of navigate feelings, but this was really a challenge for me.
Well, I mean, I can say as a lawyer, it's also a huge challenge because, and we'll talk about why in a minute, but suddenly the question becomes, who's Kelly and where is she? And how do we figure this out and unravel it? Because essentially, you were not adopted by your adoptive parents. Kelly was, and you were. And so, talk me through what you've learned since. And, part of that is through, we filed a court case in Hennepin County and got we got the records, but they're not your records.
They're not really my records. Well,
records.
half of them are. I mean, half of them are about my adoptive parents. But oh my goodness, it's like, I've learned a lot actually with the legal aspect of it. It's like, wow, it takes a long time for one.
How did you find out how this switch? Well, this is I call it a kind of a switch at surrender. How did you find out that there was some mistake or switch?
I think I knew when I found out that my birth mother was also a different person, because it was like something had to have happened. In that whole week before I got a hold of you, I'm trying to process, this must have happened. And that's why I knew legally I had to do something, because I'm not that person, and that there had to be a switch. There had to be, at birth, we were born the same day. It's a smaller place. It's not that big of a place, back then.
Booth
Memorial. And it's not there anymore, no.
Right, no, but Booth Memorial, you're saying, is a small place. And
Booth Memorial was a small, it almost looked like a really huge mansion. And
there's good, I've seen pictures of it,
yeah. And I have a friend who was a nurse, and he worked in a maternity ward, and he said, it had to have probably happened immediately, because, when they do the bracelet to the bassinet, someone could have laid me down and laid the other one down, and we got them mixed up, and, somehow it got mixed up because I went out of there as Kelly that next day. And I got sent, I'm sure, with the information from Nancy. So Kelly's mom. Yeah. So I'm, trying to put all this stuff together in my head that first week, and thinking that, well, of course I'm thinking things need to be straightened out. First of all, we need to straighten out the file. And then my sister can go search for her real sister.
Right.
I mean, and then also, to just know the files are correct. And also that I'd like to get my original birth certificate.
Right.
With my real mother on it and my time of birth and how much I weighed. And, I'm even questioning, is that information on Kelly's birth certificate? Is that really me? I mean, it gets confusing,
I can imagine.
Doesn't it, Greg?
And all that,
even us talking about it, we've gotten confused,
Right. And all that non-identifying information that you got back in 1983, that wasn't you, right?
No, wait, it was me. It was all the information about my foster home that I was in, and like my development and my birth or my adoptive parents. It explained, like how my brother struggled a little bit, with me coming into the house, and so the information on those were correct, other than describing my birth mother and my birth father and the family members. They're not my family.
Right. You were imagining this background of your ancestors, your mother, father, possibly siblings that weren't yours, and that non-identifying information that related to them, which just blew my mind. I mean, it was interesting that you said, you don't want to know who your real parent is. And that's such a loaded term in adoptee world, but it's very true in this very specific context. I mean, when we're talking about real and not real, that's actually very true in this case, where Nancy, Kelly's birth mother, has no biological relationship to you.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why when I was thinking about the legal aspect of all of this, that's where my frustration comes in, is because it's like, well, someone literally needs to, or two people need to go in, and when we find both files, is like, get the right information in with the right file, know?
And we'll talk about that whole process that we're in the middle of it right now, actually.
Right.
But I think listeners may be a little confused about the switch, not knowing that what you found out was you and the actual Kelly were born on the very same day in the very same hospital at Booth Memorial. That's what you found out, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so that switch was, I think you're probably right. There was a bracelet that was placed, and it was placed on the wrong baby.
Yep.
And then,
so, I mean, when I talked to my friend, he was so sure about it, that it had to have been right away, because that's what they do. They type up your bracelet and they put you in a bassinet with a little thing on it, and that's what identifies you.
Right.
So I was identified going out of that place as Kelly.
Right. And you were attached to Kelly's birth certificate. So when you got your original birth record, because Nancy consented to release it, you got Kelly's birth certificate instead.
Yep. So that's wrong.
Yeah.
So
and so
we need to...
I can explain kind of, part of the issue now is, especially after you contacted me, and, to be honest, I had to really think through this really hard. Like, what do we do? How do we do it? Because we're dealing not only with a huge mistake, but we're dealing with secrecy on top of that. And so you can't just go in and request records. You have to, I'm an attorney, and I know how to do this. So I had to petition Hennepin County, and luckily they're very good with understanding these issues, that particular county. And so we got your court records, which, were interesting, of course, and useful, but we still don't know who Kelly is and where she went.
Right.
Yeah. And so we had to, and the court couldn't find that either. I mean, it ended up that she was not adopted in Hennepin County, so they have no record of another adoption for a child who was born on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to petition the court again, or actually ask for another order to order your adoption agency to give us information of what court in Minnesota or anywhere Kelly was adopted in, so we could petition that court and obtain the actual records of you,
Mm-hmm.
and start this unraveling. I mean, I think I explained it to you. We're kind of unraveling an onion, and then we're going to have to try to put it back together.
Right.
Because that's really what happened. I mean, Kelly was adopted by your adoptive parents, but you're not Kelly.
Right.
And do you know that your name? I mean, have you learned since then what your birth name actually was?
Yeah. So 10 months ago, I found out that, well, actually 9 months ago, my birth name was Dawn.
Mm.
So now we refer to her as Dawn.
As this was part of the continuing efforts with DNA to narrow these issues, to narrow that down, so you could, understand who you were and who your actual birth mother is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understand that, you're fairly sensitive about, this is very new, obviously.
Right.
And I'm sure it's very shocking to your birth mother as well. So you're not really talking a whole lot about that right now.
Right. And I think, honestly, I think the first 3 months I was in shock myself, so I kind of take those months away and to really have been processing and everything. And yeah, I am protective. I'm in touch with both of my real birth parents, and I'm real happy about that.
Right.
But I do feel protective.
And I mean,
it's a lot for them, it's a lot for them as well.
Right. And
yeah.
I'm assuming whoever Kelly is, whatever her name is now, she must not have sought, or maybe she did try to seek out her birth mother, but has not been connected to the wrong person, as far as we know.
Right. Well, I'm assuming that if she would have tried to find her birth mother, she would have found my real birth mother.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, she hasn't heard from her. So, and then also my sister and brother have done DNA, and that also kind of verified that, I'm not their oldest sister.
Right.
And then if the real Kelly, if she would have done a DNA, she would have matched with them.
Right. So that hasn't popped up anywhere on DNA.
No, that hasn't popped up either.
Yeah. So just to update people, where are we right now in trying to, and I may know this better than you because I'm working through all the legal stuff, but where are we now in trying to figure out where Kelly is?
Well, we've eliminated the fact that she's not in Hennepin County and she's not in Ramsey County, St. Paul.
Right.
So now we're checking in Wisconsin.
And that's my understanding.
That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is that she was, not only does it get more complicated because now we're dealing with interstate adoption, where Kelly appears to have been adopted in a different state. And so now I'm in contact with the Wisconsin Adoption Records Search Program, which is very similar to Minnesota's law. And so it's, steeped in secrecy, but so far they've been pretty cooperative because they understand the issue. In fact, Hennepin County, the assistant county attorney was very helpful because they understood the ramifications of this and also how it's going to have to be rebuilt at some point. And I'm pretty confident we're going to unravel all this. But at some point, some adoption court in Wisconsin is going to have to correct their records. And then Hennepin County is going to have to correct their records. And each of in Minnesota, Department of Health is going to have to correct the original birth certificates and who they're linked to.
Yeah.
I mean, we did get an order to order the release of your original birth record, but we'll have to see what you get back. My guess is we're either going to get back a rejection saying this isn't you, even though it is, or you're just going to get another copy of Kelly's original birth record.
Right. Which then I'd have 3.
Right. You don't need one more.
Yeah, I mean,
need
it's
the
like
real one,
I know it
the
by heart,
actual one.
actually.
Yeah.
I
And so,
know it by heart.
and you know, she was born in Minnesota, so that means it is filed in Minnesota, and there is a birth record there that's actually yours. That is listed on it. I mean, that's your birth name.
It's very frustrating, actually, because you know, you think about it, even like people at the places that work at these state places, you know, they can see my birth parents' names and adopted names of like the adopted parents, and you know, and they go back home, and you know what I mean, and here I sit, you know, have to maybe pay money or I can't get it, and you know, it's something that it's me, you know.
Right. I think that's the most frustrating thing.
It's frustrating
for all the adoptees who've tried to get information is that, and I've talked about this before, you know, you're talking to someone who has the file in front of them and they see all the information. Yeah. And literally, if I were to able to just call the adoption agency and talk to them, and there's no extreme secrecy over it, we could figure this out in a day.
I know.
But now it's coming up on a year.
Yep.
And we're getting closer.
That's where it gets frustrating.
Yeah, we're getting closer, but you know, we haven't even got to the part where we have to rebuild it.
Yeah,
we're still in what I call discovering information, and you know, I'm sure
it took 4 months.
Frustrated for you how slow it is.
Well, I mean, it took 4 months to just even get Kelly's file, which is not really me.
Right.
I mean, part of it is about me because I could see like how much my parents made, and you know, information about what they had to go through loops, and you know, to adopt a baby. I mean, I got that, which is nice.
Right.
But it's not accurate.
Right. It's half accurate. It's accurate as to who your adoptive parents are, but it's inaccurate as to who you are.
Right. Yeah. Which gets frustrating for sure. I mean, I'll have to tell you, that's where you really have helped me, because you know, you just got to take it a day at a time, you know, sometimes just a minute at a time, you know, this is the process. This is the system.
Right. Honestly. I know. And, you know, you contact me probably more than most clients, but I completely understand why, you know, and I'm not saying that it's the bad thing that you do that. I think it's the good, because I would do the same. If I were in your shoes, I would do the same thing. I would stew in it a lot, actually. You know? That's
when I struggle a little bit, I think, when I get a little in my head and start thinking about it and get a little anxious. It gets a little tough sometimes. I think I'm getting better at it, though.
Right.
I'm getting a little better at it.
Well, I mean, I don't blame people for, you know, how slow the legal process works. And that's actually a conversation I have a lot with clients. And like, well, we just, especially like the intercountry adoptees and citizenship issues, it takes sometimes years to get progress. I know one other person in Tennessee that has a similar issue.
It's one thing when it's me, but this affected a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, my sister can't search until these files are straightened out, you know? So that's probably part of why I get a little impatient, because there are other people involved here. Right. You know, it was like one error has affected so many people. And I think that part of it is why it's been difficult for me on the emotional end of things is, you know, a lot of grief, you know, and, you know, my sister's lost time with her sister, her real sister. I've lost time with my real birth mother. You know, I mean, it's been 40 years almost that this has been a mix up. And so when you hear people say, or like a judge say or whatever, you know, like, well, I don't know, she got her file, is there any more questions? It's like, are you kidding me? There are a lot of questions and there's a lot that needs to be done.
Right.
You know?
That was the response. When we got your court file, the response was, they don't see anything else they can do.
Yeah. That was frustrating.
So, yeah. Well, part of the reason was they had no record of anyone else being adopted, but they really couldn't search in their files because they typically have to search on the adoptive parent name. And we don't know that.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to find out in Wisconsin as well. Apparently in Wisconsin, there's a social and medical history form, or social medical history form that's been completed. That's actually you. What's interesting is that the adoption search program there indicated, well, it's under a wrong name. which obviously it's probably under. It doesn't match. It doesn't match.
So then you wonder, is it me or is it
Well,
her?
no. My guess is that it's Kelly. No, it's Dawn, but you're not legally considered Dawn. Yeah.
Right.
And so
it's crazy, isn't it? It's like even talking about it, it's just, oh my God, got to get it straight. I don't know. It's just.
Yeah.
But
the biggest question I always had for you is, it's like, how do you reconstruct, or do you reconstruct, or how do you even approach the years you had with Kelly's mom? I mean, I assume that they're meaningful years for you, but
well, sure, and you think like, okay, I've fulfilled my goal, my mission of finding her, and him, my birth father, and this is done. The story's done, and it's like, no, it's not. It's now reopened, but nothing changes from that. I mean, really, I have to just look at it like it's an experience, and I cherish it, and I have history with them.
Right.
And that's my brother and that's my sister. That was a person who I thought was my birth mother, and we had a relationship and maintained it as best we could through distance. It was very different.
It's like a virtual, I don't even know what to call it.
I don't either. It's kind of strange. But anyway.
And then I think of Kelly's, or Nancy, I think is her name. Mm-hmm. I think of Nancy's having died without knowing this.
Yeah.
I mean, she died believing that she had been reunited with her daughter.
The one thing that I hope that happened in that whole thing is that, she was a very kind of timid person and quiet. And mm-hmm. I'm hoping that what happened was that there was some big healing that went on for her, that she may probably would have never had with her daughter. Yeah. And that I think that, we kind of healed together the best we could, because I'm a very open person. She wasn't real open about her feelings, but, I wear them on my sleeve. So, I tried the best I could, and, to kind of put that to rest. And, she was young when she passed. She was only 57. So I think that, she probably really kind of came to terms with it as well as I did, too.
Right.
But finding now this situation, I kind of went back into that again. Oh, so then I had like I call residue feelings, about the adoption, and not ever, bad feelings about the birth mothers, but just, maybe things that I carried in being adopted, and, so kind of went through that a little bit in the last 10 months, but it's a process,
Yeah. I've heard a lot of adoptees, including myself, describe that point where you know, or even have the identity of a birth parent. And for me, I felt completely tethered to the earth. And I've heard adoptees use that very word quite often. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I imagine, did you have that with Nancy? But then what happened? But what happened when you found out that wasn't really correct? Did you feel untethered again?
Yeah, I think so. A little bit. But I somehow could kind of, because it was so long ago, that I felt good with where we were at.
Right.
That I think it wasn't as hard,
Right. Yeah.
And I felt kind of good about like that she passed, and, she felt it was resolved.
Yeah. I can't imagine what you would be going through now if you were dealing with Nancy, if she's still alive.
I'm sure I would think she'd be devastated, I think.
Yeah, but also you'd be in many ways worrying about everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think of how to answer that. Because I've not talked about a lot of this stuff with anybody either. Mm-hmm. That's probably another reason why doing this is like, I've been processing so much and trying to figure out where I'm at, that to just talk it out and verbally say these things is different. It's very kind of scary. I really have to think about it,
Right. Yeah. Everyone will probably ask you, or maybe they already told you need to write a book. I've heard that a lot from my own experience. I'm not sure
Yeah,
how.
I mean,
I mean, you can't really write a book until it's you know what the end of that book is.
right. Yeah, I feel like we're getting closer to kind of figuring out everything, and I'm really hoping that my sister can find her sister.
Right. I think that's
Kind of my goal, I think.
yeah, and I think that's going to be the last step. Once we
Yep.
figure things out, hopefully get it corrected, which is going to be complicated because we will have to get court orders to order
Hmm.
the change of the birth certificates
Yep.
because they're not correct. And
Right.
I'm a little worried about what evidence they're going to want. When you have DNA evidence, and so I'm worried about the level of DNA evidence they're going to need. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, the good.
it's I have to say it is a fascinating case for me as a lawyer, but it's also one
Hmm.
that's really difficult to watch, and how frustrating it is to not only imagine you sort of being there and feeling in some ways powerless, but also dealing with all this secrecy, the levels of secrecy that we have to go through just to unravel this onion.
Right. Yeah, it has definitely challenged me in my patience and just having faith.
Right.
Have to trust the process, and I have to trust the timing. And even with the timing, with when I first initially got the DNA results,
Hmm.
it's like I had to be patient, but the timing was perfect. Honestly, the timing that everything just kind of picked up again. And then as this relative was checking things for a year, and we were kind of talking, in 4 months we wouldn't talk, and then we'd talk again, and then that it finally came to a head. The timing was just perfect.
Right.
So I have to trust that even in this, it's taking a while, but I have to trust the process.
Right. And that's kind of what I tell my clients all the time.
Yeah, that's what
Which is
I've been
hard.
working
Which is
on.
a hard thing to do because the process got completely messed up.
Yeah, so I'm totally being like, and then I try to help my sister as well. Like, we just got to be patient and trust the process. So
right.
you're helping me, I'm helping her.
Right.
And
she's gonna. What's interesting about your sister is she's gonna have less rights to find out more information because she's a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
And sibling rights aren't well established. I do believe they're. I'd have to look more carefully at Wisconsin. I'll probably put notes in the show notes, but whether the adoption search program covers siblings in Wisconsin, or
Mm-hmm.
adoption in Wisconsin. Well, I think there's going to be a part 2 to this story, and we'll have to get back together once we unravel it and hopefully are successful in getting everything corrected. I can tell you that I've learned a ton from this whole process, even though I've done similar processes for years. I will say it's very enjoyable to work with you on it.
Thank you.
And I completely understand having the frustration and how slow it is. This whole process is.
Well, like I said too, you've helped me a lot in it, and I think that you being adopted as well is really, I trust you, and I know how I feel, so that's very comforting. So.
Yeah. Did you contact any other lawyers before me? Because I'd be curious if they just said, well, I don't know what to do about that.
It's funny. I was just thinking about that this morning before we got on. I did reach out to a couple people, and it's interesting. They did not want to touch it. And I had one attorney say to me, a woman, she said, "Boy, there sure are a lot of DNA, situations coming up for people." And I'm like, yeah, like it's taken off.
When you got secrecy built into the system, you're going to have a lot of DNA popping up here and there.
Yep. I mean, it's like she was just amazed, but yeah, she didn't want to touch it. So that's why when I got your name, when my sister gave me that email from that author lady, your name popped up, and I thought, oh, well, he specializes in this, so I'm with the right person,
Right.
So
I think you called me first, and I rarely pick up the phone because I get so many phone calls. And half the time, I mean, I don't mean this critically at all. Half the time, it's an adoptee and then they want to tell me the entire genealogy, and I just don't have the time to do that. They're always interesting, but I just can't do that. But your case and your genealogy was very different, and it needed attention. So
well, yeah, and even with, normally I'd probably be the same as that person if I was just looking for the birth certificate, and but because of the situation, I mean, and I don't share it with a lot of people. I mean, it's a very detailed story, and to people just to grasp it or track it as you're speaking about it, and they're like, "Wait a minute, is that your birth mother now, or your one with Oh my gosh, it's been a little frustrating to talk about it. So I do process a lot alone. Yeah,
I was gonna say that before we got on and started recording, we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this so people understand it? And so we finally decided that, okay, we'll definitely reveal the first names of the adoptees, Kelly and Dawn, so people can actually kind of track those. Because I think it would have been way too confusing to say that adoptee and this adoptee.
Right.
You're Dawn.
It is difficult. It is difficult, though. I mean, it seemed like I said to you earlier that, when you say to somebody, well, actually, I took the identity of a different baby.
Right.
Then they get like, oh, okay. Wow. It's like they seem to grasp it then. So anyway.
What blows my mind is that you, Dawn, have been adopted by some other parent somewhere in Wisconsin. I mean, legally.
Yeah, legally.
They adopted Dawn.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's you. That's just crazy.
It is crazy. And then the whole thing about, then my adoptive parents changed my whole name.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you're taking on another identity, and then I don't know. So, it's like, did she too? Did they change her whole name? And then that baby is associated with the adoptive parents. So, so for me to even try to get my Dawn birth certificate, it's not matching with it's a problem.
Well, I think that's why we'll either get it rejected from the Department of Health in Minnesota, or you'll just get Kelly's
another
third one. Yeah.
Third one.
Or I mean, I guess for the third possibility, they may actually call me and say, "Hey, we got to talk to you about this."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what's going on?
I was very clear in the application, in the letter to the Department of Health. There's like, this person is not Kelly. This person is Dawn, and so you need to find Dawn's original birth record.
Right.
And her mom is not Nancy. It's the name of your actual birth mother. But we'll see if they'll look carefully to try to figure that out.
Yeah,
they're probably not authorized by law to release it, is my thought. And so that that just becomes that's the last. Well, there's two last steps. One is to correct the birth records, and the last step, I think, and you're right, is to figure out how Kelly can get the right information. Or not my sister.
I mean, my sister can't search. I don't believe she can't search until it gets straightened out. So she's trying to be. I mean, it's got to be really difficult for her.
Yeah.
So,
if you were to give a title to this podcast episode, what would it be? Would it be Finding Kelly? I don't know.
Switched.
Yeah, it's switched. But everyone always thinks switched at birth, which I guess is true.
It is true.
Yeah.
I was
switched at birth, but then raised by adopted.
I know. How do you condense that?
It's not one of those traditional switched at birth stories. Yeah, it's something much more complicated. That's why I kind of call it switched at surrender. But it probably happened before the surrender. Yeah, but, do you ever wonder I wonder how many other adopted people are out there just like this? There's got to be more. I mean, I know one in Tennessee. And that was, ironically, he contacted me, and I'll probably have him on the show at some point too. He contacted me a few months after you did.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
I'm limited, and because it's Tennessee, so I don't practice law in Tennessee, but
right.
What I learned from this process, I think, will help others.
Well, yeah, and I think too that's probably been another challenge, is that it's one thing to be adopted and talk to an adopted person, but then you got this different situation, and to talk to somebody who's been through it, where are they?
Right. And those support groups for adoptees who are switched at birth.
I'll tell you, I have to tell you though, I mean, honestly, being in the program and,
I bet.
it really does help because,
Yeah.
I know how to navigate. I have the tools. It really has helped me to just kind of do it on my own, really.
Right.
Even my kids, they're adult kids and they don't quite understand it and, imagine how I feel and stuff. So, I mean, I can tell them things, but they don't really get it.
They think you're they think you're a little crazy, or just like, oh, that's mom talking about her adoption stuff again. I mean, that's what
I kind of stopped talking about it. I mean, if I find out something like from you or something, I let my daughter know or something, but they know it's been they know it's been kind of hard on me a little bit too. So I think maybe they're, a little protective, but.
Right. And it's their ancestors too. I would think about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's affected them as well. So, they're kind of processing on their own too. So,
I mean, if you imagine too, that if, let's say in the future, if one of their kids does some sort of genealogy project and this wasn't ever corrected, they would go down the wrong genealogy trail.
Right.
Completely.
What really started this whole thing? What really got me to do the DNA was my first birth mother. She shared with me that she wondered if my birth father had a child with somebody else. So that stuck in my head since I was 23 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is years ago, right? I'm 61 now.
Right.
So it's like, that was really the driving force. That's what really pushed me to do the DNA. And also because my daughter had said something when I picked her up at school of when she was in high school, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I saw this woman in a car just a little bit ago, and it looked I swore it was you." And for some reason, between those two things is when I did it.
Yeah.
It was strange. And I remember it.
Yeah.
It was a defining moment of, I need to do this DNA. And look what happened.
Right. Completely different trail that you went down. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Which you're still on. Yeah.
Which the truth came out though, which is interesting.
The truth always comes out with DNA generally. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an equalizer.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
I guess I'm good. I appreciate you. I need to tell you that. So
yeah, well, I appreciate your trust in me and patience as well. And it's a process that's ongoing.
Yep.
But hopefully we'll have, I'm always optimistic we're gonna have a good result. It just may take a lot of time.
Right. Well, we're in it. So
yeah.
I'm determined that it's going to be figured out, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're both dogged. I think we're both dogged in getting the truth and fixing it. So I think if you have that, if you have that, then we're going to get somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've come this far too, so it's kind of like,
right.
I feel like we're on our way here, so that's a good thing.
Diane's case is still moving forward, though it's currently now in Wisconsin as we await word from its adoption record search program and information about Diane or Dawn or Kelly's adoption in Wisconsin. I'm sure we'll be back on the podcast with an update on the case as we continue to unravel what was a devastating mistake that has been constructed, complicated, and hidden for decades by secrecy. What Next is written and hosted by me, Gregory Luce, and is a production of Adoptees United, Inc., a national nonprofit charitable organization dedicated to equality for all adopted people. Please follow, subscribe, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and sign up for the newsletter at adopteesunited.org/whatnext. And make sure to support us with a tax-deductible donation at adopteesunited.org/donate. Anything you provide helps us keep the lights on. See you next time.